Thank you guys again. Now I can see you guys. Let's just start with the good stuff. Let's maybe like a short round of introductions. If you can please just, tell a little bit about your story, your background, and maybe why you got into composing for visual media. Let's just start with you, AJ.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us, Bruno, first of all. And my name is Muniroglu, and I'm a composer. I moved to Los Angeles in 2017, around 4 years ago, and I moved from Boston, where I studied at Berklee College of Music. And till then, I've been working on a variety of different projects, and every project is different, but I'm writing additional music and I'm assisting, and yeah, depends on the time. And when I first moved here, I did some internships and I tried to expand my network, as a usual composer would do. And that takes a little bit of time. So I always say, like, it's important to be patient, and eventually one thing lets another thing. And I'm very grateful to be here. And about how did I get into music? I actually originally studied architecture, where it was my first career back when I was in Turkey, Istanbul. And I finished my degree. And while I was doing my final project, I learned that Berklee is having the audition, and I signed it up right away because I always loved music and I always wanted to do music. That was my dream. And then I get accepted, and that's how my journey actually professionally started.
That's awesome. There are actually a couple of questions around those things that you just mentioned, like you switching careers, right? We'll get to that. I also,
sure.
Just out of curiosity, I was checking your website and the work that you've done. There's a lot of stuff that are related to like horror movies and sci-fi and thrillers. Is that something that you like really love doing, or did those just happen and you were there and you did the work? And
actually, those just happened and I was there. I personally can't watch horror movies. It's because then my next 1 month is very bright because I have to turn the light on. And but I actually enjoy scoring horror movies a lot, because when the music is not there, when I have the picture, it's not scary. It becomes scarier with the music. So, and yes.
That's cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Of course.
Xiao'an.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Thanks, Bruno, for having us. So my journey began at 16. I picked up the guitar then. I wasn't sort of like a lifetime musician. It was also the first thing that I was good at. So at least it was the first thing that I was able to put effort into and then get a result. And so it was a very rewarding experience. And from then on, I was quite obsessed with music, and I wanted to be a session guitarist. When I eventually made my way to Berklee College of Music in Boston, I discovered that there were quite a few excellent guitar players that started school at a higher standard than I would finish. So it came time for some examination of myself. And so I jumped into composition. Not that there aren't also a lot of great composers out there, but it seemed like something that was appropriate because I'm a fairly cerebral and academic kind of person. So I went into composition. I did jazz composition, and I studied it for most of my career at Berklee, and then I realized at the end, I probably should learn to make some money. So I picked up electronic production, and I eventually shifted my focus to media and film and games. After graduating, I realized that I'm not making any money, so it doesn't really matter. So what I did is I started an orchestra, which I ran for 5 years, called East Coast Scoring, because that's the first thing you do when you need to make a living. You start an orchestra, right? So I managed about 200 musicians in Boston over the course of 5 years. And at the same time, I was building my network like AJ was doing as well, and trying to build my career as a composer. And when that started to take off, I wound up the orchestra. And last year, I came back home to Singapore, and most of my clients are in games and advertising all over the world, really. And but instead of, I used to do the traditional networking method of going to conferences and stuff like that, but I do most of my networking online now. Something I'm happy to talk about at any point. And here we are on this
That's
path.
awesome. That's such a great great story. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the connection methods that you use, because I found you through LinkedIn, right, as well as David.
Yeah.
And I noticed that you also have like some sort of like a forum, or how do you call it? Like, are you sharing constantly? Like,
I'm sharing constantly. I have a newsletter, so it's one of those. It's a new functionality on LinkedIn where you get to you can have people subscribe to your newsletter separate from your profile. It's subject matter related, and so it is a functionality that is available to some. And I think that if you keep posting content and you get a sizable following, the functionality will be released to you, or at some point in the future, it might just be released to everyone.
Yeah. That's cool. And just a last question before we move on, like, you moving back to your country, did it have anything to do with COVID, or no, was simply?
No, it does get, so I was on my second O1 visa. For those of you who are familiar with it, it's the visa that composers have to be on in order to work in the United States. And every 3 years we have to renew it. And it tends to be a very expensive process, especially if you, like me, are risk averse and prefer to have a professional help you with the process. So I was quite tired of having to justify my existence in a place where you have to pay $8,000 to go to the hospital.
I feel you very much.
Yeah, I imagine so.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, there were many reasons, but I think, after about 7 years, it seemed like my life was changing a little bit. I got married. My wife is American, but she's here with me. And I guess it was time for something new. And so why not try something old?
Nice. Beautiful. Awesome. And thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah.
David.
Yes. Thank you, Bruno, for having us, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I think, for me, I kind of came at scoring and composition a little bit differently than I think perhaps other folks may have. I was very fortunate. I grew up in the electronic music industry. I started playing keyboards at the age of 2, legitimately, not, just smacking on the keys. And my father was actually one of the pioneers in electronic music. He was one of the founders of ARP synthesizers. So for me, I had the opportunity literally at a very young age to be able to, start playing with synthesizers, make sounds, experiment, find ways to be a little more creative. So, I grew up in that and started developing, obviously, a proficiency in that, not just in music, but also in the ability to program. That kind of led to, as I got older, to start doing more session work. That led me to become a product specialist for a variety of synthesizer and sampling companies. And again, this is old school. This goes back in the 80s and into the 90s. And that led me into more session work. And what was really interesting was one day I was in the studio working on a project, and the studio head came in and said, "Hey, do you know how to write jingles?" Well, I didn't, but of course, absolutely, I know how to write jingles. It's not a problem. When do you need it? Well, we need one for tomorrow. I'm like, all right. So I literally went to the bookstore to see if there was, because this was pre-internet. So yes, I'm dating myself, but this was pre-internet. So I went to the bookstore, couldn't find a book on jingles, but I knew that a jingle had to be 59.5 seconds, or if it was for TV, 29.5. And I don't know how, but somehow, I figured, look, it's got to have a hook, it's got to be catchy, and I got to get it in the timeline. And I did that, and they loved it. And that led to more compositional work. And then, ironically, I met another individual who was working on a biography for the A&E series biography Again, this goes way back, into the 90s, and said, hey, we're doing this whole thing on Milton Hershey and Hershey chocolate, and do you think you could write some music for it? Absolutely, not a problem, right? Because you never want to let anybody know that you can't do it, right? You gotta exude confidence. So I said, yeah, absolutely. So I did that. They loved it. Moved on. Started picking up some smaller things, with Nat Geo, and that just kind of continued to get bigger and bigger and pick up more and more things. And anytime there was an opportunity where somebody said, hey, do you know how to do, fill in the blank? Always say yes, right? Because you'll find a way to get it done. And you probably do, especially nowadays, because a lot of things have been standardized. But that just kind of led to more and more. So, I'm a keyboard player. That was my, first thing as a jazz musician and a fusion musician. Obviously, as you score more and more for film, your playing chops maybe aren't quite as good as they used to be because you're actually, writing a little bit differently. But yeah, that's ultimately how I got to kind of where I'm at today.
That's super cool.
It's a little bit different.
Yeah, it was probably very natural, right? Like probably like just stuff happening and opportunities showing up. And
yeah, I mean, it was, they always seem to be progressive. So, one thing leads to, and honestly, I'll tell you this, for me, writing jingles was probably the best education you could get for writing music for film and television.
mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is you've got 60 seconds to tell a story. And you've got to tell a story, whether it's about a brand, whether it's about, sometimes commercials are like, a scene from a film or television. So it can't be too busy, but it has to carry the scene. So you learn how to do all these things naturally. And more importantly, at least for me, you have to learn how to write music in a variety of different styles. You can't be stuck in one style. So for me, I was learning how to play and compose music, in Renaissance style, pop style, Latin style, big dramatic. Sometimes it would be a parody of Indiana Jones, or something like that. So it really forced me to explore how to write different styles of music that you wouldn't normally get, I think, in probably a different way of going around it. So I mean, that's how it worked for me, and that was very helpful.
That's cool. Really cool. Thank you, David.
Yeah.
Greco.
Oh, okay. Thanks for having me. I have to say that I did the same thing as David did when Bruno asked me to join this panel and help him out with the Music Cosmos panels about, music for visual media. I was like, do you want to do a panel? I was like, yeah, sure. Sure. Yeah.
No all the time. No problem.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. And then you go about figuring out what it does, how to do it. I moved to LA when I was a lot younger than I am today, and to go to music school, to Musicians Institute, and as a guitar player. And I have been living here and working as a guitar player primarily since then. I've done a ton of session work. I've done tours with a bunch of people. And then last year, everything came to a halt and touring kind of stopped being a viable way to earn money. So I decided to kind of redirect where my attention was going, and writing music, composing seemed like a very natural thing to do. So in a way, it kind of is like starting over after I've had this career in another, as a player, as a musician. I had written for commercials, and I had written for a few things, in movies and television series, but not as a full-time, not as my full-time job. So this reinvention or redirectioning or repurposing is still underway, and I'm just navigating and how to go about it, and obviously studying and lots of catching up to do, and but it's been fun. It's been very rewarding to do it. As a beginner in this medium, I found out that writing for competitions seemed to be very a good way to build a portfolio, because I had no idea how to make one. So I've been doing that, and out of that, I got a gig writing for an audiobook, and so I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess you just keep at it, like, patience.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, and we'll also be going to be talking about that, because there is one particular question about competitions and if it's worth it or not. But I would like to start with the good stuff. A bunch of people asked, because we've been doing these panels for quite a bit now, and like, what are your struggles as composers? What are your struggles, like finding clients, or like, let's be real, like, what are the main and again, feel free, all of you guys, to start what's the main thing that you can think of, like it could be from when you started, like as a composer, or now currently. What is the thing that makes you worry the most as a composer, being a composer?
I mean, I guess I'll jump in real quick. I mean, I've been doing this for, I don't know, almost 30 years in different formats and different mediums and whatnot. And I think, one of the challenges is, how do you stand out? How do you differentiate? Yeah, I guess from my perspective, the one thing, if you look back at all the A-list composers and you think about what makes John Williams, John Williams. I mean, that's probably about an hour conversation right there. But for example, what makes John Williams so successful? What makes Hans Zimmer successful? Tommy Newman, all of these guys that are just amazing. And they're all great composers. They all write great music. They're all competent musicians for the most part. Not all, but some. But what is it that really differentiates them? And really, at the end of the day, it's what they sound like. It's the sound. It's the orchestration. It's, you can listen to Thomas Newman and know it's Thomas Newman instantly, just by the way he voices his chords. He loves to put major over minor, and put them at different octaves. I mean, there's just something about Tommy's music that sounds that way. It's the same thing with John Williams, the motifs he uses. It's the same thing with, Hans. He loves ostinatos. And we could go on and on and on. That's not to say that there's not millions or at least thousands of phenomenal composers. And I'll tell you a funny story that a friend of mine, a guy by the name of Mike Post, who is a prolific TV composer. Mike, if you listen to anything from the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, Mike, either Mike did it or my other friend, Jonathan Wolf, did it. Magnum, Rockford Files,
the X-Files,
Those Blues. Yeah, I mean, everything. But what he was saying though is Mike was like, look, I am so blessed to be able to do what I do because there are so many other composers that are far better than I am. He's like, I don't know what it is that I got so lucky, because there's so many other better composers out there than I am, but I just got lucky. I was at the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. And, I said to him, I said, Mike, I get that. I appreciate that, but you have a sound. I mean, like I know a Mike Post score theme instantly, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think as a composer today, I can't tell you how many young composers I listen to, or that, hey, can you listen to my stuff? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And I'll listen to it, and everybody's trying to copy Hans Zimmer, or, take your pick, your composer du jour. And there's a time and place for that, particularly if a director say, hey, we really want it to sound like whatever the temp may have been, which is, composer's worst nightmare. But finding your own sound, I think, is the biggest challenge, and that's a unique journey for every composer. Everybody's got to find that sound that they're looking for. But when you think about it, that's what differentiates these top. I mean, you listen to Alan Silvestri, you know it's Alan Silvestri. It sounds like Alan Silvestri. Bear McCreary, I mean, it sounds like Bear. I mean, so anyways, that would be one of the things I look at, and I've worked very hard to try to craft my sound a little bit differently so that it differentiates. And sometimes I could say, oh yeah, well, it's because I blend in some synthesizers naturally, because that's kind of what my journey was and what my early experiences were. But anyways, that would be kind of one of the things I would bring up as far as a challenge for composers, is to find your sound, find your voice.
How would you what would you say, like, it would be like a couple of important things for people to look for when they're trying to figure out their sound? Like, would you say, like, study more or learn other composers, whatever styles first, and then how would you approach that?
Well, I think the first thing is, don't try to be John Williams, right? John Williams is John Williams, and he'll always be John Williams, and we don't need another John Williams. We might need another Greco or a Bruno, but we don't need another John Williams. But there are things as a composer you can, go to, for example, and you can listen analytically to and say, okay, John Williams voices his strings this way, or he uses these types of orchestration. When Conrad Pope does his orchestrations for him, they're always this. He always has the woodwinds doing this, or he always has the brass doing that. And it's the same thing. Like, they have these identifiers. Hans loves ostinatos. So, those kind of things. So just being aware of those things are really good, because it becomes just another paint on your palette. But really, at the end of the day, you just got to go with what you do, and don't be somebody else, because we already have a Tommy Newman. We already have these people. There's only one Dave Frederick. There's only one Bruno. And that's what we want to hear. So I think when you're trying to develop your sound, you really got to resist the urge to sound like, oh, I got to put my demo together and I need it to sound like Hans Zimmer, or I need it to, no, don't do that. Because first off, nobody wants to hear that, your ripoff of Hans Zimmer. They want to hear, what will you do? What's your interpretation of my vision as a director, or the vibe I'm looking for? So try to be yourself. I mean, it's hard, especially if you're younger and you don't have a sound, or you don't really know where to start. But what are the things that you really enjoy doing? I mean, if you really enjoy putting acoustic guitar in your scores, then that is something that should be identified with you, because that's an important piece of who you are as a musician. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, I mean, at least from my perspective, that's the way I would look at that.
Totally. Any of you guys want to add anything? Any struggles? Any?
I agree with you, David. Thank you so much for explaining so clearly. I was actually listening very, so I can learn from you. And I can, on top of that, I can maybe add, I personally do a lot of self-doubts, and did I do good enough? Could I do better? And even though I know I did my best, I always have a doubt, and it's a lot of insecurities and ups and downs, but what I learned, it's just that's part of the process. And as soon as we acknowledge that that's the part of process, and it's okay to feel this way, then we can move forward and we can be more creative. And it's important to not be stuck there too long. That's one of the struggles. And the other one, it's obviously a lot of long working hours, and we need to be by ourselves in our studios. It's a little bit lonely. And for me, I like to try to balance it out. I love my time here, but as soon as I'm done with this, in order to balance, I go outdoors. So when I come back, okay, I can again work very creatively, passionately, with all my energy. We can add more, but those are the main things that comes to my mind.
That's a great point too, that you talk about doubt. And I think every composer that I know, and I've talked to them, some of them are, you know, at the top of their game, all say the same thing. They're, you know, I can't tell you how many times I'll get somebody will send me something and say, hey, can you listen to this? Like, because I think this sounds like crap, but is it any good? And I'm like, dude, you know, you are like, you know, so successful. What are you talking about? He's like, nah, I don't know if it's any good. And I'm like, oh my God, yes, it's good. Yeah, but we all have that. You know, that's just,
Right.
that's just kind of part and parcel. That's a lot of times, that's why, like, when I'm done with a project, I won't go back to it, because I'll go back, and if I watch it, you know, you fall into two camps. It's either like, wow, that was actually pretty good, and I thought it was pretty crappy, or, oh my God, that was terrible. I'm never going to get another project.
Very true. Yeah.
So I'm going to jump in with something that's a little bit different in approach, in that I think one of the biggest struggles that probably faces composers as they graduate from school is that there are a lot of lies in the music industry. There are a lot of superstitions and a lot of, you have to do this, or you need to do that. You need to do an unpaid internship. You need to do this for this many years. You know, you need to be in a particular place. And the truth is that the world has changed quite a bit, and the video games industry is massive, right? Everyone is making TV, right? It's not just in one or two places. So I think it's really important for young composers to learn that they need to objectively assess the risks and benefits of being in a particular place or going down a particular route. I mean, you know, I had a lot of questions from people who asked me, why did you stay in Boston? You know, like, why don't you go to LA and try to work in Hollywood? You know, you probably get a gig. And I'm like, do you see anyone that looks like me? Is what I said. And everyone I've said that to has been dumbfounded because they never even thought about it. And of course they wouldn't, you know, I mean, why would they? And the thing is, you know, this is not from a point of bitterness. It's more like, statistically, it's very unlikely. And as I mentioned before, I'm fairly risk averse in some ways, even though I started an orchestra, and that sounds like a fairly risky thing to do. But it's important to sort of evaluate your chances. And one of the reasons I jumped into games is because the barrier to entry was lower, right? In the sense that you would be able to make sort of a middle-class living without having to have a great deal of capital outlay in your equipment, dropping $30,000, $70,000 on a demo, which some composers in Hollywood are very proudly talking about. You know, they drop $70,000 on a demo for something that they don't know that they're gonna get. And this level of risk, you know, if it's not something that you're comfortable with, or for example, even the obtaining of the equipment that would even allow you to be on a similar level, right? As far as sound goes, not talking about experience, not talking about connections, family, that sort of thing, which is massive, right? It's really important to sort of take a good look at the numbers of your situation and figure out where you fit and what you can do that will generate the greatest return for maybe the least risk, or where a risk is worth taking. So I think being able to pass through the superstitions and the lies of film music and composing for media in general is really important. So I would say that one way around that is to be talking to as many composers as possible and annoying them by being very like upfront and honest about, say, rates, about work practices and stuff like that. So it's very difficult to get past lies, especially when the lies are what drive an industry of unpaid labor. So I think this is probably one of the biggest struggles, because it's a huge barrier. By the way, I've never done an internship. I did one for 3 days and I left. Right. But other than that, I've never done an internship. I've never assisted a composer. I have never had a studio. And by the way, I have never audio treated my room. I have saved every dollar, right, in order to upgrade myself to the setup that I have today. I've like been living on the edge of that, but I've been making no sort of unnecessary expenditures, so that I have a setup that rivals people who have had to spend maybe twice the amount of time and money to get there. So have a very objective look at the numbers of your situation and look around the world. there are a lot of opportunities. You just need to know where to find them, and you need to know what you're willing to do in order to achieve those.
Yeah, if I can jump in on that, those are two really interesting points. And I think the first one, just circling back on sound and what you want to identify with, your gear is really important. And that doesn't necessarily mean you need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, fortunately, technology has been democratized. So now, with a laptop and some libraries, you can do some amazing work. But when I first started, you buy a sampler, it was not cheap, and sample libraries were not cheap. Now, this technology has been democratized. So I think investing wisely in technology is probably one of the smartest things you can do. You don't need, a million and one things. And I always see people, with these huge, posting pictures on Facebook and whatnot of all these big studios they have. And that's fantastic. I used to have all that stuff too, but, I've become kind of a technology stoic. What works for my workflow may be different from others, but I think if you can invest in the right technology, and at minimum, you've got to meet that standard. If it doesn't sound like what you're listening to in the movies, you're probably not going to get, at least a lot of the bigger projects. The other part, though, Z, that you were talking about was it used to be a very niche industry, right? And there was a group of people that really got 99% of the work. But now there's so many more opportunities for a media composer, games, podcasts, book on audio, everybody's making content, YouTube videos. So the opportunities, I think, are far greater than they've ever been before. I mean, library music, you could go on and on and on. So you don't necessarily have to be shooting for that, next Indiana Jones movie. You can be doing a lot of things, I think, to be relatively successful, to, build your competencies, get a little more confident, start to hone your workflow, and that was the big thing for me is workflow. How do I work, right? I'm very impatient. If my hands can't deliver what I hear in my head, I get very frustrated because I move very, very quickly. So for me, technology has to work at that same speed, where other people are a little more cerebral. They think through it, okay, harmonically, what would do this? I'm more of an intuitive composer where I it just, whatever's coming out is what's coming out, and then we'll fix it as we go along. So I think those two things that you touched on were really, really important.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's all incredible. I was taking notes and looking at the other questions. You also mentioned, David, and I think it's cool to highlight that it is really, in this day and age where everything is accessible and everything is you order something on Amazon today and today you receive it. People want it today, right? They want to be composing for the next Indiana Jones movie tomorrow. They don't want to take the time. They don't want to do the podcast. They don't want to do the whatever audiobook. They want the big thing right now, right? They want the badass gear right now. They don't want to, slowly. And I think it's really important, the patience, right? That's.
Yeah, patience is, obviously there's a reason they say patience is a virtue. Yeah. But I would also say around gear and projects, last thing you want is to take on a complex project if you don't know how to run your gear or how to get the most out of your gear, or at the bare minimum, deliver your project in the manner in which it's expected to be delivered. Right? We talk about stems and we talk about, the file formats, and, now you start getting into gaming, and, now you've got gaming technology where before, when I started doing gaming, I wrote the music, delivered you finished WAV files, did the sound design, delivered you finished sound effects. Well, now, everybody wants all of these things programmed or program ready. So again, knowing how to use your gear, how to deliver to the technical specifications, not just the creative side, but the technical side, I think is also really important. And I think that's something that a lot of people skip. They don't put that effort and detail in, and you have to, because the higher up you go in production, meaning the size of the production, the exposure of the production, the budget, all of those things, you're going to find yourself in a really bad situation if you hadn't taken the time to understand that stuff and know that, hey, my stuff's got to be normalized to 0 dB. It's got to be 2448 minimum, probably AIF or wave. There's just all these little things that ultimately make you a professional.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I always talk about, because it's overlooked because you're just in the process. Oh, I'm going to be creative. I'm going to write something really neat. But if it sounds like crap and you delivered it wrong, now you got a whole nother set of problems that has nothing to do with writing music.
Yeah.
You know, and so you want to make sure that you get that down, especially when you're working on smaller projects. It's like, okay, I'm going to learn my gear. I'm going to know how to run it. I know how to deliver the deliverables. Because really, those are the things you're judged by. They're not judging you based on your compositional side of things. You wouldn't have gotten the job if they didn't think you could do the music. But
it's a given.
It's a given. That's right. You know, what they're looking for is, are you a professional? Do you know what you're doing? Can you deliver the stuff? Or do I have to go back and deal with you to fix it? Or do we have to spend more money to try to get it to what I know it sounds stupid, but that's probably 75% of the gig.
Yeah, no, and I don't think it's stupid at all. I think the one major thing that keeps showing up in the artist community, like these people not looking at themselves, like their personal brands, as a business, when other companies or other small business, like a coffee shop, when they, you know, when there's a new coffee shop in the corner of our place, like these guys have to learn finances, these guys have to learn marketing in order to provide coffee, which is their composition. And I feel like a lot of us artists, we lack this vision of, you know, we're a business. And
Bruno, that's the problem right there, is you keep using the word artist, right? If you're going to compose for media, you're not an artist, you're a service provider.
True.
That's what you are, right? I mean, people are hiring you to deliver a service and a product. And the reason that's important to understand the difference is artists create art, and we all want to consider ourselves artists. But if you want to be in this business, you need to be a service provider. That means you need to be professional. That means you need to understand budgets. That means you need to understand your technology. And most importantly, and this is the most painful part of it, is you have to deliver what the client wants, right? On time and on budget, by the way, right? But the thing for me that I've always, you know, talked to other younger composers about is, you're not an artist. If you want to be an artist, that's fine. Go ahead and be an artist, but you won't work in this industry. You have to be a service provider. And you could write the greatest piece of music for this particular scene or this product or this game sequence, but if it's not what they want, it doesn't matter, because you're being paid to deliver something that they're looking for and they want to pay for. So then you get into the whole problem of, yeah, but that was a great piece of music. Yeah, but it wasn't working for me. Yeah, but it was awesome. Didn't you hear it do this? That doesn't work, right? Look, and I've seen it happen where producers are like, look, dude, I'm paying you to deliver what we want. That's not what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And you either go back and give them something different. And believe me, it sucks as a composer, because you listen to it and you go, man, this works so well. And then that gets into all the soft skills of, you know, people skills of being able to say, okay, well, what, you know, and this goes back to what I always refer to as my main job, which is asking questions. And those questions are, okay, you don't like that. That's great. What didn't you like about it? Was it too fast? Was it too slow? Was it too many strings, too low? Because I think if you ask the right questions, you'd get down to the real issue. And it may not be the actual piece of music. It just may be they didn't like the strings. They would have preferred woodwinds or synthesizer or fill in the blank. So again, these are the soft skills, I think, that's not taught in college, that's not taught in internships, that you really need to be able to develop to be successful in this and probably in life as well.
Yeah.
Let me jump in right quick. I think going back, patience, the thing about patience, it's also understanding that it's a process and it takes time. And everybody here has had or is in their respective journeys. And so when you see somebody that at that moment has had some sort of success, understand that it didn't happen overnight. There has been, a whole bunch of years and struggles and growth and fill in the blank to get where that person is right now, that you're seeing, that, oh, this guy's really, or this girl is really hot right now and they're doing all these things and it's amazing. How did they get that? Well, it takes doing it and it takes time. The thing about being an artist, I think you can have both, but again, I agree with David. You're a service provider, and that happens in the musician, sideman, session player world, where you're hired to provide a service, and the artist or producer needs to be happy with what you're providing. Same thing for the director. It's his vision at the end of the day. If he's unhappy with his movie, or the soundtrack that you wrote, it's his vision. Now, of course, you see the videos and you have these top composers talking about, well, yeah, I know he was not happy with that scene, but I had to sell my idea in a way because I really believed that was the best thing for the scene. And in the end, some of them get that point across, which brings the soft skills that David mentioned, right? But I think you can also have the artist side where, all right, well, when I'm not providing a service for a movie, for a director, for an artist, I am doing my music and this is what I do with it. And then I can do whatever I want and I feel it's the best expression of my creativity. And I think lately there has been a wave of composers that have bridged that gap because they are being called to do what they do because people heard their music first and not their soundtracks. Like Johan Johansson, like Hilde, like Olafur, like Resner, Hauschka. These guys are doing their own take. It's their music. It's what they do. It's not, they're gonna Elfman, somebody. Exactly. I just watched the masterclass, Elfman's masterclass, and he did the same thing. He was like, "Oh, somebody called me," and Elfman said, "I think you'd be good writing for picture." And he was like, "Really?" Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he got his first movie. That was it. And he didn't know, but he said yes. It's like, okay, yeah. And then he wrote the themes, and it's like, it was the right place. It was the right moment where all these things came together, and then boom, But before that, he had done. He was the music director for the Oingo Boingo theater company. This was before the band. He was the music director for his brother's theater company, and he had to write all the music. So anyway, but we don't, you don't know about that. So that's the thing about process, and that's the thing about, to me, about the artist thing. It's like, okay, I can still do my artist thing, but understand that the moment I deliver my first, that's the way I saw it when a few commercials that I've done. The moment I delivered the first, I got the job. Okay, this is what I think it should be. The moment that was delivered, then it was not about me anymore. Then it was about what do you think? And then I would get, a list of notes like, okay, well, yeah, we think it needs to be faster. We think it needs to be this. We need to make it bigger here. Okay, no problem. I delivered to you what I thought it should be. But then after that point, it's about making you happy. At least that's the way I saw it.
Beautiful. Anyone else?
I forgot what the prompt was.
I think we went from we entered a bunch of different things here, but anyway, that's all brilliant. I just wanted to go back a little bit. Xiao'an mentioned a little earlier about the, like fitting in. Like you look at, like LA or New York or whatever, and you saw like, maybe I'm not gonna, blend in here, so I'm gonna move back to Singapore or whatever. Do you guys, and there is an actual question for AJ here, if she faces challenges being a female in a male-dominated industry, and again, like this could be to you or Xiao'an as well. Did you face any, like racial challenge by not being like American or whatever, being in America, or AJ as well, like being a female working amongst men?
I like personally directly didn't feel such thing, but obviously we are in a male-dominated industry for sure. And what happens in general is when you're a female composer, it's harder for you to get noticed. So that's like the general thing, because we are in a male-dominated industry. And so that's the main thing, I think. But what I try to do is I look at all the female composers and listen to their stories and listen to their struggles. And so I kind of have an idea what's waiting for me. And hopefully, and I think that's changing recently, and hopefully it will be better in the near future. And then we won't be saying any more female composer, and it will be just composer, hopefully, like one day, because we never say female scientist, male scientist. It's just it's I hope like one day, very soon, and this will change. But yeah, we're definitely in a male-dominated industry.
Yeah, well, AJ, regarding the scientist thing, my wife's a scientist, and the STEM field, I think, has like 30% women. So it is also quite male-dominated. So hopefully, over there, there'll also be some changes. Same with AJ, I've never actually experienced anything directly. Some people have made some Asian comments, but it's more like ignorance, and I think they're just trying to understand more. Of course, I mean, the fact that I have to go through this labor of explaining my ancestry is a little tiresome and boring, but it's not directly offensive. As far as in the industry, it's not like I didn't feel like I fit in, so I left. That really wasn't it. It's more like, the whole thing of doing the visa, and I kind of felt like it would be nice. I was kind of getting a little tired of the Trump administration, to be perfectly honest. And I'm not saying that this move back to Singapore is a permanent one, but we'll see what happens. As far as facing discrimination directly or like with regard to work, I guess I've been asked to score Asian sounding stuff, which is really funny because my education is in Western music. I study jazz composition. I have no fucking clue how to write Tang Dynasty music or how to write Japanese music, which is the thing I was asked to write. I'd be like, oh, we wanted, and the worst thing about it was that it was a diversity initiative. So they're like, we want to hire diverse composers. And I was like, great, okay. We want to hire an Asian composer because, we have a Japanese game. Like, no. That's basically, I was like, no, because I don't know. I know a guy in New York, his name is Zach Zinger, who's like an amazing musician, and he knows like a million times more about Japanese music.
And he's Brazilian.
No, he's a white guy. He's a white guy, and like he plays shakuhachi like insanely, just ridiculous, So it really doesn't, it shouldn't matter. Right, it's like they shouldn't hire you because you're Asian. They shouldn't hire, and no one's asking for that. They shouldn't hire you because you're a woman. They should hire you on the strength of your work. But as we know in this industry where quality is very undefinable, talking about quality is a way to actually, I think, skirt around the issue that we're not really about quality. It's only up to a point. When you breach that getting to the industry standard level of quality, which ideally all of us would be at, at that point, it is very much about luck and opportunity. You can do things, however, to engineer that, to generate more luck and opportunity for yourself, but there is a limit. So as far as like the, not being like everyone else thing goes, it's probably, I think it's probably worst for Black composers, because I think when it comes to, I've seen, especially my Black friends who are orchestral composers, there's always a great deal of skepticism about whether they can write or whether they've had the the education to do it, which is really funny because like one of my absolute favorite composers in the video game industry is a Black guy, and he's just ridiculously good.
Yeah, I think I brought it up because there was one of the questions was directed to AJ, and I think it's super important to talk about those things, because people as soon as they hear like a couple of words, they feel like let's not talk about it. And I think it's important to raise awareness, and thanks for sharing. David mentioned earlier something about like creating your voice as a composer. I'll use again the words artist, but creating your voice as an artist, as a composer. And both you guys are from different countries, and you already mentioned a little experience that you had being offered to compose something that resembles Japanese music. But do you feel like the fact that you're from a different country and being exposed to different cultures, does that influence on the style of compositions that you do?
I would say probably in some sort of subconscious way, because when I've been asked to write Chinese music, which I'm also equally untrained in, right, I have been able to sort of generate something a little bit more convincing than your usual Chinatown stuff, but like the Hollywood Chinatown stuff. But so it's probably because it's been my ears, because during Chinese New Year, you walk around the shops here and like, everyone's playing some fucking Chinese music. So it's drilled into your head. So, I mean, everywhere the sum of our experiences, right? So there is probably an amount of that. So depending on where you grew up, I think that if you grew up in, say, I don't know, like Argentina, you might have a little bit more of a feel for what tango music should sound like. And if you grew up in Japan, you've probably heard some traditional Japanese music. So I will say that it does probably help, but I have not tried to quantify whether it actually does.
Yeah, as like you said, actually, like we are definitely influenced by our culture's music, even though like naturally, but like when I have a project, it's mostly so disconnected from that, and I just hear what the director or what the composer is asking, and whatever they want, that's my aim, and that's usually very different than what I grew up with.
Yeah.
And
actually, oh, sorry, AJ.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that I keep getting asked to write various forms of like world music, and they never actually want the thing they're asking for, because I've asked for like they were asking me like, can you write some Egyptian music? And I was like, are you sure this is what you want? And then they sent me a thing, a reference. I was like, that is definitely a duduk. I was like, that's Armenian. So I think that we have to understand not only the culture, but also the lens through which that culture has been sort of like fetishized or viewed through the years. And then you understand that that's what they're asking for, and then you have to be okay with yourself for doing the bad thing.
Yeah, I mean,
to make a living. Yeah.
I remember being in school and Tommy Tedesco gave a lecture.
Oh wow!
And Tommy Tedesco, was probably the most recorded, or it was at the time, most recorded guitar player in the history of the world, and his had been done every movie, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, until his death. And then he said, I go to a session and they say, oh, you know what, we need something Mexican. We need real Mexican stuff. And he would go, great. That's exactly what we need. Thank you very much. Then he would go to another section and they would say, oh, you know what? This is like a Peruvian kind of music. Are you familiar with it? And it's like, yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, how about this? And they would go like, amazing, that's exactly what we want. So that's what you said, Xiao. It's like, it's not, sometimes it's not, you know, because we've studied music and we've been music lovers all of our lives, it's like we want to go for the authentic stuff, you know, or as authentic as we can. But we need to understand that it's through the lens of the person who's asking you that, and it might not be authentic at all. It might not even be what they're asking you. It's just like, oh, they want that. That's that vibe, which has nothing to do with the word they use to label it, you know.
Yeah, definitely when people ask for Chinese music, is they want to, that's what they're thinking, you know, even though, like, you know, look, some of it does sound like that, but most of it, there's a lot of it that doesn't.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Also, bringing back, I think David mentioned earlier also about like libraries, right? Like developing or writing music for libraries. One of the questions was, how do you see platforms that provide soundtracks and general licensed music? Do you feel that these platforms are bad or like bad competition for composers, for everyone? But that was.
I mean, I guess from my perspective, libraries are a great way to get your music into media. You know, there's a variety of platforms. I mean, obviously you never want to pay to have your music on a platform. There are platforms that offer content management and content distribution. You know, like SongTrader, I think is a great system. You know, you've got opportunities to submit your music. You can distribute your music for digital distribution. You can manage all your libraries. So there's things like that. But I think trying to get your music into a library is a great opportunity, not only to drive revenue from your content, but also, you know, to start getting a name for yourself. I mean, I've done that for years now, and you know, can't tell you how many times, you know, somebody has said, hey, you know, we used your track on, you know, X, Y, and Z, and we really liked it. We want, you know, can you do more? But, you know, we want you to do that. We don't want to go through the library stuff. So it's another avenue for opportunity, but it also gives you an opportunity to, you know, to drive revenue. I mean, particularly if you can get something on network TV. So, I mean, I'm all for it. I think it's a great way to do it. One of the things I've learned over the years is, you know, I started sending my music out and had it all over, you know, probably 15 different libraries. And the problem that I found was it's hard to keep track of who's got what, because a lot of times you may get a royalty on something, but you're like, they retitle the cue. So you're like, I don't know who the hell had that, you know, piece of music. So you don't know who's being successful, who's not. And more importantly, you start to find out like, hey, this library is placing a ton of stuff. This library, I either don't know or they're not really placing anything. And there's ways around that. There's ways you can, you know, tag your music so you can see who's doing what and all the other. There's a million ways to go down that road. But the point is that if you can find a handful of really good libraries that really like your music, that know, you know, I've had libraries say, hey, look, you're a great composer. You can do all these great different things, but we really love your tension music. We love that stuff. So, you know, we want you to be the guy for tension. And we've got these 10 different series we're providing music to. You know, would you do it? Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, I can whip that stuff up pretty quick, no problem. So finding a couple of libraries that work well for your style of music, work well for placing your music, I think is really important versus having your music all over the place, in my experience. You know, other people may have different experiences, but I've had music in libraries for about 20 years now. And, you know, I've had a bunch of libraries and then smaller libraries. And now I feel like I've got a pretty good mix of about 5 libraries.
suggest, and that's what I've done, a spreadsheet.
Yep.
With all your works, and if they get a different name, I just went through this where I got 5 songs submitted to a library, and he renamed it, all of them, because of the deal that we did. So, all right, on my spreadsheet, it'll say this song as a new name, and then if I get something, that's what's going to show up, and I know where it comes from. Ultimately.
Yeah, it's a lot of administrative work, but it pays off in the end, because like I said, I mean, there's been times I've gotten royalty statements. I'm like, what the, I have no idea what that's from. I don't know what library. And then it becomes really difficult, to be able to track that stuff. And the other thing I do too is I'll create folders. So I know that, all the music I did for this library is in that folder, and then this folder, that way I know who's got what, because some's exclusive, some's non-exclusive, and it gets kind of crazy. But the whole library thing was great, but the whole thing with discovery and the way they were looking at changing things and the way royalties are calculated, it kind of threw the industry up on its head. So the percentages are less. That's a whole nother conversation, but I still highly recommend it. It's a great way to get placement and to drive revenue from your music.
Yeah, and I think it's also, the way I looked at it last year was I got in touch with this friend of ours, friend of Bruno and mine, and he has a library thing happening. And to me, it was 2 things. It was an exercise of finishing a bunch of tracks that I had sitting around and were doing absolutely nothing. 3 things, actually. One was developing a relationship with somebody that could drive revenue. We don't know, but it's the songs are not doing anything.
Right.
They're not finished. They're sitting on a hard drive. So, and it's an exercise in getting the chops up of writing. Let me finish this. Let me learn how to, okay, I hear this. How do I achieve this? Okay, I need to learn how to mix this. Okay, how do I? So it's all good in the end. And if it makes, $50, $100, $1,000, I don't know, but I'm putting it out there so I have at least the opportunity of something happening with it.
Yep. Xiao'an, you raised an important point here. Would you mind sharing with us?
You talking about in the chat?
Yeah.
Yeah. So someone raised, Florian raised
Yeah.
a story of somebody who paid for his house thanks to 2 of his songs in a library. And, that's very good. And I'm quite happy that someone's able to achieve that level of success. But every time I hear of such stories, the question that immediately pops to mind for me is, all right, so that's a good story of success. What is the percentage of people in the industry that are performing at a similar level or working as hard or putting in the same amount of effort? What percentage of those are achieving that same level of success? And I think if the production music industry is 2 billion across the world, right? And it seems big, but that's actually not a very big number. So it's really important to ask the question of exactly, like, if you're trying to get into it because you're hoping to build a large catalog of songs that many of which get licensed at a sort of like a medium rate or so over a long period of time, and that you're trying to build that sort of business where you have like decent monthly recurring revenue, that makes sense. But if you're in it because you're hoping to get that quick buck, right, it's probably not going to happen, because the chance of somebody just happening to use one of your works that are not your best work, it's not very likely. Because, for example, Universal Music, like, has like 500,000 songs in their library, and there's just one of the big publishers. So I think when it's really important, I think, that when we talk about these stories of success, we mitigate the survivor bias by also acknowledging that this is a very rare event. That's all.
Yeah, I think it's if you want to make that your business model, then yeah, then it's still going to take time, and it's a process, and you're going to have to write a ton of songs and make it and look for the library that's a good match for your songs. And maybe you're going to have a similar story. Maybe. It's still not guaranteed at all.
Nothing's ever guaranteed. I mean, that's the first thing. You need to realize
taxes.
Yeah, death and taxes. Those are the only certains. You know, but regarding the library stuff, yeah, I mean, it's hard. And one of the things you should really think about if you are going to work with a library is how many composers do they have, right? Because if they've got, let's just say 10,000 cues in the library, and many of these libraries have, you know, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of cues, how many composers are contributing? Because if they've got 25 composers, you know, you're 1 in 25 chance of having your music heard or being able to compete. So now you're competing, you know, with potentially, in some cases, libraries have hundreds of composers. So these are all things, you know, you need to ask questions about. If you're going to get engaged with a library, you know, ask, you know, how many composers do you have? You know, how many cues are actually in your library? So that way you can get an understanding of, hey, what are my chances of actually potentially having my music placed? And, you know, there are people that make a lot of money with music libraries, and there's nothing wrong with that. Personally, for me, and I think collectively perhaps, it's just one stream of revenue. It's one other way to get your music out there. It's one other way to, you know, in a lot of cases, a lot of the stuff that I've put into libraries is stuff that may have been rejected on a project. It's a great piece of music. It just, you know, wasn't right. So they rejected it, went into a kind of a file where I keep, I don't want to call them rejected music, but music that didn't work. And all of a sudden you find out, hey man, I've got like 30 pieces of music here. That's all really good. But it's not being used. So here's a way to potentially get it out there and at least get some ROI on the music.
Thank you, David, for the great point of view. I think it's very important to, you know, keep that in mind so we can use it whenever we have the chance and to be ready with that vision. Also, I haven't done a lot of library work. I've done some. I just wanted to add this little thing. It can be very useful to work on some library music in between the projects, rather than just waiting for a project to come, or while we are looking for a new project. It's a great opportunity to write more music and use that time more productively. And yeah, just wanted to add that.
That's a great point. I always say nothing's ever wasted, right? Musically, you know, and doing that. I mean, think of it this way. It's an opportunity for you to create more music, learn your gear, maybe try out a new library or, you know, new sounds, or nothing's wasted. So I think that's a great point, to use those down opportunities to write more music, you know. And Bruno, somebody had, I guess, asked a question here to me, or maybe to everybody, I'm not sure, but it was regarding sound libraries and
go for it.
Going back to that thing. And I can address that from my perspective. You know, everybody in the world now has, you know, sound libraries, orchestral libraries, this library, that library, and some are good, some are bad, some are mediocre, some are very expensive, some less so. I guess the question was about directors. You know, they want to hear certain things, and I guess the first thing I would say is, you know, you want to get the highest quality library you can, right? You want people. The problem is, because of the democratization of technology, the bar has been lowered, right? And the bar has been raised on the other side. So now a lot of people have access to technology that before only people who were very successful in the industry could afford to buy. You know, now people can afford to buy these types of things, but the bar is higher as far as the quality goes. So now, you know, they're expecting strings to sound like strings, and they're expecting horns to sound like horns and not samples. You can't really get away with that unless they're looking for something from the 80s or the early 90s, you know, that kind of sound. So I would argue, you know, get the best that you can get. And it doesn't have to be Vienna, and it doesn't have to be the full set of Vienna. But, you know, I think the question was around Spitfire. I'm a huge fan of Spitfire. I love Spitfire products. I use Spitfire products, highly recommend Spitfire products. No, I'm not endorsed by Spitfire, but, you know, I think they make great libraries, but I use other libraries as well. And I know, for me, there are certain sounds in Spitfire that are my go-to sounds, but there might be other stuff in Cinesamples, or there might be other stuff in other libraries. Like I might like the horns here, and I might like the full orchestral here. So I think for an individual, yes, people are going to expect your demos to sound like finished scores, without a doubt, without a doubt. Two, get what you can afford and then learn how to use it, right? And incorporate orchestration. You don't have to have taken a course in orchestration, but know that strings are not always at the same volume in a cue, right? They may, they've got dynamic range and they've got different articulations and whatnot. So try to get yourself a library that has some basic articulations that you can work with, and then learn how to use that. And what I mean by that is learn how to put that MIDI control data in there, whether it's through sliders, whether you program it into your DAW, but understanding all of those things so that your library sounds as realistic as possible, I think is a critical thing, because everybody expects it to sound the way it's supposed to sound at the end of the day. Does that make sense?
Totally.
I'm gonna jump in and say, do they really know the sound of a Spitfire library? Does this director really, can he really tell that it's the sound of a Spitfire collection? Or is it something that you were asked, Yevgeny, and you were honest enough to say, no, it's the other library that I got because I couldn't afford it? I mean,
yeah, I mean, my experience, I've never had anyone say to me, oh, is that the Spitfire, brass? No, but
sometimes people want to hear the name. Oh yeah, of course it is. Yeah, I only use Spitfire audio. Oh, right. Great. I love that. Great.
I've not had that, but what I have had is other directors who have worked with other composers, or directors that are also musicians in some way, shape, or form, that are familiar with these things. And they might ask, hey, was that X, Y, and Z? But not necessarily, I want your demos to be in Vienna, or I want them to be in Spitfire. No, I don't think, I don't think that's ever going to be the case. But you'd be surprised now and again, because again, all these things are available to almost anybody for a reasonable amount of money. So more people are familiar with them. So I have had people say, oh, dude, that's Omnisphere. Yeah, I got that. That's really cool. So I think from that perspective, you'd get that. But I've never had anyone ever say,
and they might know it because, the last composer they worked with, they were really enamored with the sound of it, and they asked what it was, and the composer said, oh, this is so-and-so. And then that registered as like, oh, I really like that sound, so I'm gonna ask for that. Now,
they lock onto that because now they got a musical term they can use. Oh, exactly. Hey, that, X, Y, and Z, and, so they can relate in that sense. I've seen that as well.
The other thing, if regarding like cost benefit of libraries, it might be a thing for beginning composers, and I'll throw myself in there, to wait. There are several promotions every year. There's a Memorial Day sale, there's a Labor Day sale, there's a Thanksgiving sale, a Christmas sale. And some of these libraries get, they get 50% discount sometimes. So if it's something that you really want, but you can't afford at the moment and you can wait, it might be, interesting to keep an eye on when these sales happen, because sometimes you might get the, a whole bundle for the price of one library at a different time of the year.
Yeah, and the other thing too, just to build on that, is if you're a student at any school, a lot of these libraries have pretty aggressive student discounts as well, like sometimes 50% off, 60% off. And I've seen that, with everyone from Heaviosity to, Spitfire to Cinesamples, so forth and so on. So if you're a student, definitely take advantage of the student discount. And if they don't promote that, certainly ask about that, because you can probably save yourself a lot of money.
Also, David, you mentioned earlier a little bit the importance of automations and velocity control. And I wanted to add, I always use a bunch of automations, and that's how we can have the sound that we want. Actually, without those automations, it's still not complete. And I used to love, I'm still loving geometry since my childhood. And sometimes I look at my sessions, I'm like, whoa, there is like art design with with geometry, and so I wanted to tell all the young composers, I'm young too, but don't be afraid to draw all those automation lines. Just draw as much as you can.
Yep, absolutely.
Really cool. Xiao'an, were you gonna add something to? Was you unmute and then you mute? Did you?
Oh no, it's just I didn't want to have any extraneous sound interrupt.
That's all great. I love, David also pointed earlier something about like learning your tools, right? And not just like going out there and buying a bunch of gear without learning. And I think it's really important advice to, I think it goes the same thing, you know, for us guitar players, like know exactly what the instrument can deliver, you know, what does the knob do, like if you place it in a whatever position. And I think it's really cool when we're talking about libraries, like to really learn what a specific particular library that you just bought and you spent like $500 on it, what it does, what it can deliver. So then later, maybe you feel like you need some different articulations and then you go and you upgrade. And I thought that was really cool. Just changing a little bit the direction. There's a really cool question here. And I think we kind of like touched a little bit on it. Like has there been any benefits imposed by COVID era in terms of creative flow, networking, or communication with clients?
Benefits?
Benefits, yeah.
I will say that a lot more people that are active online, and because they're home and they're bored, these people are a little bit more receptive to communication. So I think that's been pretty good for online networking. I mean, I mentioned earlier about networking online, and something that I've done for about a year and a half to 2 years is something known as inbound. I have an inbound content strategy in that I create content on specifically LinkedIn, and that gets me a lot of people coming towards me. And I think that people are consuming content all the time. They're on their phone all the time, right? But there is a limited number of people that you can reach out to personally in a single day, but there is an unlimited number of people theoretically that could see your content online. So I think that the one of the benefits, you know, of COVID is that since people are at home and bored, they're more likely to see, look at stuff online, and that includes your work or things that you have to say or some of your personal branding online. So now is the time to figure out how to stand out in that way. And I will say that, you know, I had a call with like Netflix because, you know, and on that call, my contact was saying to me, you know, I hate LinkedIn, you know, and I try not to click on anything, but your stuff just kept coming up. So I clicked on it and it was great. So I thought we should have a call. So, you know, I mean, stuff happens like that nowadays. And I think it's because people are bored. So try to get online if you're not already doing that. It's not just about writing the music. It's not just about being good. It's also about making sure that everyone knows not just how good you are, but how nice and personable and interesting you are as well, because that's the first step. You know, the opportunity comes much, much later, sometimes years later.
It's definitely easier to connect online because, as you said, people are more bored, they have more time. And I just wanted to add, there are definitely less events in person. There used to be always many more events, so that's way less. But there are so many events online. I feel like there is an event every minute. On my Facebook, I see like one event, the other event. So actually that has increased a lot for whoever wants to join an event. There are way more now.
I think one of the big benefits that I've seen, and I think also supports this whole notion of distributed work. You know, before everybody, you know, and I used to say this too, and I'll tell you the argument I used to make to my wife to get her to move out to with me to California. But you always had to, well, you got to be in LA. And I would agree with that. I'd say, yeah, you got to be in LA. If you want to design cars, you should probably live in Detroit. If you want to, be in the stock market, you should probably be in, Wall Street. You want to make entertainment, you got to be in LA. And I think that had been the case because, producer would come over and meet with you, or you'd meet for lunch, or you do these types of things. I think COVID was a catalyst in a sense that you can do things now through Zoom that we couldn't do before, and the ability to collaborate online and the ability to, have team meetings with people, I think has been a real benefit. And I think that is going to change the way we do what we do going forward. I still think obviously relationships are important. Seeing people face to face is important, particularly in our industry, because it is a relationship based industry. But I think COVID was definitely a catalyst for, how many people, I can't tell you how many people I know in LA that bailed, right? I mean, they moved to Colorado, they moved to Texas, they moved back east. They've done all these things and they're like, yeah, I'm not coming back. Screw that. And they're able to still do the same level of work. It's just different now. So I think that was definitely a positive.
Awesome. Thank you. Greco?
Yeah, I agree with David as far as now you it's more possible to do this from anywhere in the world. And Xiao'an, sorry, I'm saying your name incorrectly.
Everyone does. Don't worry about it.
Xiao'an, when you're sending messages on the chat, just be aware that you're sending now just for us.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so I'm just gonna send those again.
Because there are people like communicating with Xiao'an through the chat, and so just keep that in mind. Greco, sorry.
So he's doing that. He moved back to Singapore. And it's geography is not a deciding factor anymore. It's you can do this from wherever. As a session player, it's a bit. I prefer to be in the same room because it takes me 5 minutes to play a take on the song. Because there's somebody producing or directing what I'm doing, instead of if I'm doing it by myself. Then it's like, okay, is this good enough? Is this not good enough? And then I have to engineer and I have to press record, and then it just takes longer. And then I have to send the tracks, and then I have to wait for feedback to say, oh, you know what? Yeah, we like this, but we don't. Whereas if you're in the same room, it's instantly. It's like, no, we don't like that. Can you do that again with this? Yeah, no problem. Boom.
And maybe you're even creating parts just in case, right? Like creating variations
exactly
just in case, and then you spend an extra hour or so.
Yeah, because what's maybe the level of demand that I have on myself is probably higher than the producer would have. Maybe for them a couple passes and they get what they need, and for me a couple passes and it's like, well, let me do it 5 more times, and then I'll comp between these 7 tracks, and then I'll give him a track that I think is perfect. But it's all subjective. If you're in the same room with the producer or composer, they know what they want. They know when they hear it.
Yeah.
And they're able to tell you exactly. No, yeah, great, you're done. Or no, not quite. Let's try it again. This time with this in mind. So I prefer being in the same room.
Awesome. We're reaching the end of our gathering. There are a couple more questions though, but they're simpler. What do you do? And maybe let's start with David. What do you do to nurture your creative space? And if you do experience writer's block, and how to deal with that if you experience that?
I don't usually experience writer's block. That's kind of been a foreign idea to me. I've been very fortunate, but I also take to heart something I saw John Williams say, which was write something every day, anything, it doesn't matter. Even if it sucks, just write it. And it forces your mind to just think creatively. And so I've kind of taken that to heart. And then another thing, you know, Hans Zimmer does a lot of times, and I've done as well, not as actively as I had been, which was taking what John Williams said and putting it in your sequence. So just, you know, take one track, write an idea, right? Even if it's a motif or whatever it may be. And then, you know, the next day you come back and, you know, track number 2, right? Mute track number 1, track number 2, write something different. So now you've got this whole, you know, collage of musical ideas that you can come back to at any point and go, yeah, I'm looking for a motif, you know, I don't know. And you go back and listen to some of these things, go, yeah, that was cool. I remember that. I really like that. So it's just a way to kind of incorporate writing every day, even if it sucks. It doesn't matter. Just write something. And then 2, being able to catalog that music has been helpful for me. But a lot of times I just, you know, like I said, way back at the beginning, I'm more of an intuitive writer. I don't sit there and think, okay, I mean, you know, certain things I do, like certain keys I want to write in because I know it may invoke a certain feel. But generally speaking, I just start writing, and it is what it is. And sometimes it's terrible. And like I said, I'll save it and move on and try something different. But it's just, I'm more of an intuitive writer. I know other composers are, you know, far more analytical, theory-based, you know, okay, if it does this, it must do that, and therefore it should be this. That's just not how my brain works. You know, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. That's just not how I'm wired.
That's cool. Awesome. AJ?
I listen to a lot of music, and I try to listen to a lot of soundtracks, and I don't do this because I have to. I really do it because I love it. And the more I listen to music, the more my vision expands in terms of that. And on top of that, I really like checking out orchestral scores, printing them, the ones that are available, and just listening and looking at the orchestral score at the same time. And eventually one time comes, and then I think of that motif that I really liked that I would like to use in a different way. And that's what I do. And I actually do it because I'm really enjoying doing it. Yeah.
I mean, writer's block has always been when I'm more focused about getting it right than getting something out. So you need to sort of silence, like tell that editing voice to stay quiet for a little bit and just put something down. The more notes you put down, right, then you can start to make decisions. But it's very difficult to make decisions if you haven't put anything down. So there's nothing to edit. So why are you editing, right? So you need to silence that editing voice and just get something done. And it gets easier to do it if you write regularly, right? I mean, especially in the early days, you have to be writing all the time because, you know, music is a set of decision-making process. You go from one note to the next and you make a decision each time. And then every time you make something, you are sort of cementing heuristic tools that you're making in your head to sort of go down particular paths, because that becomes your voice. You get your voice not by necessarily thinking about it, but by doing, right? Eventually you start developing habits. Those habits become your voice. You can develop thousands of habits, and eventually no one's going to have the same set of 1,000 habits that you have, right? So it's important to just keep writing without judgment. And which is why don't just write when you have a job, because that's when the stakes are high. Write when you have nothing to lose, when the only thing you have to lose is just writing a shit piece of music, which happens all the time anyway, so it's okay.
Very true.
Badass.
Yeah, I mean, everything that everybody said, yes, write every day. It doesn't matter how good it is or anything. Just write a piece of music every day, but finish it. Finish the conception of that idea. It doesn't need to be fully orchestrated or a mock-up or anything. It's just, here's a musical idea, done, okay. Or maybe it is, you know, go to your computer, DAW, and it's like, all right, I'm gonna write a woodwinds, or you're experimenting with a new library and it inspires you to write something. And it's like, oh, this is cool. All right, let me write this and let me see where it takes me. Okay, cool, I'm done. Okay. I remember watching a video by a composer, Trevor Morris, where he goes about, if you're writing for television, you need to, in his opinion, you have to write 6 minutes of music a day, 5 days a week. That's how he does it, right? And the way he does it, he has blocks of time, and he writes for 40 minutes, takes 20 minutes off. And at the end of the day, he prints it. No editing, not that day. And he does that five days a week. On the 6th day, he edits, revisits, reviews it, revisions. But it's the exercise of doing it. I remember same thing. I remember once I was trying to come up with a song and nothing was coming, and I was like, you know what? Let me finish writing a song, and it's going to be the worst song in the world, but let me just unclog the channel with stuff that's, it's sitting there and it's just occupying space. And then I did that, and within 5 minutes, I wrote a new song, because I allowed myself to, 1, write something that was bad without judgment, 2, finishing something and opening up the channel for something new to come in.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing, you all. Thank you, Karen, Darla, for the comments, Brianna, Dave. This is the end of our panel of really, really incredible, really insightful. Thank you so much, Xiao'an, again, for waking up super early to join us. Eje, David, really great. Great meeting you guys. Greco, thank you again for joining this. Let's take a picture, screenshot. Yes, right?
Yes.
I'm gonna do it here. Feel free to do it there as well. So 3, 2, 1, thank you. Awesome, guys. Really appreciate it. Have a great, enjoy the rest of the Saturday or Sunday. And I'll see you guys again next week.
Thank you so much, Bruno. And it was lovely meeting everyone here.
Yes. Thank you.
Bruno.
Thank you, guys.
Likewise, take care, everybody.